So, our learning objectives today, hopefully by the end of this, you'll be able to describe these changing expectations, attitudes, and needs of incoming Gen Z students and their how higher education may be affected, and develop a toolbox of strategies and resources to use when working with these students and apply instructional design approaches. So let's talk about the breakdown of Gen Z. Gen Z is considered to be born between 1997 and 2010. So Gen Z is the 2010 part is a little um, off. It's more of like, well, not a little off, but like there's a lot of discussion about whether or not it's like 2010, 2012. It's interesting. So the youngest are in high school and they're actually turning 15 now, and the oldest are turning 28 this year. Um, and the end of Gen Z, though, they're going to be entering higher education between, or excuse me, in 2028 and 2029. So they're still arriving at higher ed, where the end of Gen Z has not happened yet in your higher education classrooms. Um, so in the chat, when you think of Gen Z and education, what phrase comes to mind? What phrase comes on? Digital native, digital anxiety, yep, short attention spans, online bored. Okay. Phones open, disillusioned, minimalist, okay, rebel. I'm teaching my friends' kids, yeah, or my kids' friends, yeah. Screens. Yeah, so there's a lot of it's a lot of interesting ways to look at Gen Z. And this is why I kind of want to that Kosi and I want to talk about this is because I think there's a lot of ideas about who Gen Z is versus what Gen Z tries to communicate, which is kind of interesting. So, but let's see where you guys are in this, okay? So the breakdowns of generations, we have the silent generation, 1928 to 1945. These would be my grandparents. Um, baby boomers, 1946 to 1964. Gen X, 1965 to 1980/81. There is an argument about when this ends. Millennial, 1981 to 1982, about the start to 1996. Here's where Gen Z falls. Gen Alpha, which actually they ended last year in 2024, so that's a little thing. And now we have Gen Beta. Gen Beta started this year. So we now have new generation. In the chat, what I can never forget a Gen Xer. I'm sorry. I'm married to a Gen Xer. He would never let me live it down. Um, in the chat, tell me what generation you are a part of based on this. I'm a millennial. I'm an elder millennial. I was born in 1982, and so is my colleague. Okay, I see a Gen Z, couple of Gen Zs. So I hope that I do you guys justice, or we do you guys justice. So yeah, a lot of Gen X, a lot of millennial, of sprinkling of Gen Z. Um, a late boomer. Yeah, my parents are late boomers. So right here. We also have to remember the micro generations. You have Gen Jones, which are the very end of baby boomers, beginning of Gen X. Zennials, which are the very end of Gen X and beginning of millennial, and Zillennials, which are the end of millennials and beginning of Gen Z. And yeah, they kind of seem a little weird having these divisions, but a lot of this is based on socioeconomic data and sociological research about how different events affect different groups. And if we had more time, I would go more into depth about what the differences are, why these are these different designations and why these micro generations exist. But unfortunately, we don't have time. So, oh, I saw a question in the chat. Jen Jones is more 19. It's because it's the cusp of a beginning of baby boomers and end of baby boomers, beginning of Gen X. Sociologists say 1954 to like 1966. So a subgroup. But yeah, good question. So let's talk about Gen Z in two different ways. We're going to talk about Gen Z before COVID, and we're going to talk about Gen Z after came around. Because here's the deal. That's how Gen Z has broken up. Um, because of this event, this pandemic, then we have this division in this age group of experience, which is creates this interesting phenomena in higher education. So before the COVID-19 pandemic, according to the Chronicle of Higher Education in 2019, Gen Z college students, university students were wanting a clear break from expectations of previous generations, especially those from the millennials who went to university. It's shown in three main areas. You have recruitment, campus life, and teaching. And when we talk about recruitment and campus life, they didn't necessarily want what was expected of what millennials and a lot of times their baby boomer parents expected in um, college life. When I was starting college, that was in 2001. That was when the start of having the really nice dorms and having the really nice student center exist like came in and amenities that right resort experience while getting education. We had to pay for it. But yeah, in the older Gen X area before COVID, they started to say they wanted more practical and more focused experience. Less about the amenities, more on what is the money going towards and what kind of access do we have towards virtual academic and health resources, right? Being able to meet those needs and knowing where, how much they're spending. With teaching, they wanted that switch between the virtual and the real worlds. And they wanted education they could apply, which, I mean, that's what all generations really wanted. But there was more of a push for this in the first part of Gen Z. Usable project-based learning, research opportunities, and remember, it was about the money, 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 money. Which makes sense. College got very expensive. Um, well, what about technology? I'm a learning technology specialist. And we're all here for digital learning's brown bags, so technology is important. But it was important as part of a flexible learning environment. It wasn't we have to be online for all our education. Um, in fact, in 2018, Pearson did a study with Gen Z and or millennial students and graduates about what they saw. So Gen Z believed that 78% of Gen Z found that instructors were very or extremely important to learning and development, but they only 39% preferred teacher-led courses. So that whole teacher as facilitator, not teacher as director kind of thing. Um, which if education courses, that was something we were drilled in education courses, but only 22% preferred self-directed learning, which is interesting. And then 55% wanted in-class act or 57% wanted in-class activities. So that was the trend going into COVID. And were these students listened to? Well, kind of. There was this push of having more flexibility. There was this push for a lot of it. But unfortunately, it really wasn't. And then March 2020 hit. And then everybody said, oh, we need to fix how we do things because now everything is different. And since March of 2020, in just this short amount of time, um, uh, you see that um, there's a post-COVID-19 expectation. And it's divided into these three areas: flexibility, bridging the digital divide, and preparing for the world of work. And it's not limited to an academic view. It's no longer just going and getting a degree. There's more to getting a degree that maybe other generations believed or wanted, but there's more discussion about it. There's more calls for it now. So when we're talking about the post-COVID expectations, a lot of these students were these students who were saying this were either in college but not close to graduation when COVID hit, or were in high school when COVID hit and everything had to adjust. Um, Sorry, my screen didn't want to move. Flexibility. So when we talk about flexibility, learning must meet the needs to meet the need. Whoa, I see a typo. Excuse me. Sorry about that, guys. Must meet the needs of their lives as well as their classmates. And it's not just limited to an online or in-person class. Um, they believe that students students from all generations who are going to school have so many things outside of going to school that are calling their attention, that there needs to be that flexibility in learning to help them still meet the needs that they have, but also um, focus on still getting to be able to focus on their education. Because let's face it, this generation has had a lot more challenges hit them at once than a lot of other previous generations. You know, and that's something a lot of people have talked about of doing this presentation in the past, and Khosi can kind of agree. Sometimes we get very negative attitudes towards Gen Z about being selfish, being self-centered, that kind of thing, when the research actually shows the opposite, and it's the environment. And flexibility for a lot of students is tied to accessibility and equity. It's not about them, it's about making sure education is accessible and equitable. In fact, EDUCAUSE's report in 2023 said that its flexibility allows for students to distinguish between their own personal preferences and the larger ethical implications outside of their own preferences of learning modalities, hybrid course modalities, letting students choose their own modalities for engagement. Now, this is something you probably worry with having online education and digital learning, is this digital divide. And Gen Z students, especially after COVID, have become more and more concerned about closing this divide in education. It's not just about internet access. It's about giving the students access to the learning resources and devices they need to succeed. And it's this idea of digital education equity, right? We live in an area where there is a lot of issues with digital education equity with our students, depending on where they're logging in from, where they're coming in from around our region. Since we have so many students who are from East Tennessee. So higher education, this is what a lot of the research says: higher education institutions have to consider and understand the disparity students face. Maybe not having access to computers and other devices as readily or as quickly, as readily as you would expect. Not having reliable access to the internet at home. You've probably all gotten messages about something going on with the internet at their houses, that kind of thing. Dealing with issues connected to disabilities and or socioeconomic factors that could inhibit access. When I was a high school teacher, during COVID, I lived in a rural suburban uh, uh, district and worked in that district outside of Atlanta. And we would have students parking with their families with one laptop in the McDonald's parking lot to get Wi-Fi access because their internet access at home was not reliable, or they all couldn't get on because it just wasn't it wasn't available. And so those issues do not go away once they go to college, once they go to university. And I see people are commenting, sorry. Um, yes, there is that issue. And it is a very unique experience, and there is a huge change. And yeah, so I see a couple people talking about their experiences. It's very much a lot of these issues that are here appearing here are still issues when they were in high school or middle school and today when they're coming to your classes, even if they aren't part of Gen Z. Your students who are maybe millennials or Gen X or even baby boomers are seeing these issues as well. A 61% in structure who makes Canvas, 61% in 2022 of students reported at least one tangible impact on their coursework due to technical issues. And we're not necessarily just talking about the internet was slow. Something happened. Their computers are too old. Their phone network crapped out because they're using their phones. It's at least one time while they're trying to complete their coursework, something happened. Issues like this create a digital minority or digitally excluded. Um, they're less likely to graduate. They're less likely to participate in extracurricular activities if they want to be a part of that. They're less likely to be as academically engaged. And since 2020, the concern for digital education equity has created this mounting pressures for higher education institutions across the country. And then preparing for the world of work. This is all something we worried about when we were in university, when we were all getting our undergraduates, or our graduate degrees, doctorates, whatever. They want to be able to find a job after they graduate from college. When I don't know if any other millennials or Gen Xers can attest to this, but I know when I was going to college or in high school and about to go to college, there was that pressure of going to college just so you can get a degree and be educated. It wasn't necessarily to get a job obviously after you graduate, but it was that social impact of having a degree. Um, so that's kind of this push, and you already started seeing that as students started approaching the COVID era. But since 2020, students are looking at when they apply to universities whether or not they are able to start a career after they graduate. And you're actually seeing some of you may have already seen this research. You're actually seeing research of students not necessarily wanting to go to a four-year university if they can't build a career from that. So seeing this liberal arts education combined with professional skills training. And they want tangible proof of skills for future employers. Having a bachelor's is not just going to cut it for them anymore. And unfortunately, employers are saying the same thing. So this is not just based on what students want, it's also what employers are showing. And these are the two expectations they want when we're talking about the workforce. Skills-based learning becoming more and more valued as practical education, towards practical education in the workforce, and certificates and apprenticeship programs are higher valued both by students and employers as proof of workplace skills and upskilling or reskilling for lifelong learners. And that is from an instructor structure report from 2023. And remember, students just want to go beyond receiving a degree. They want to make an impact. It's not just getting a job, it's about being good productive citizens in the world too. So so how can we meet these evolving expectations? Well, my wonderful colleague is going to start discussing that with y'all as well. And if you have any questions in the chat, please do. So
Thanks, Sarah. I love the conversations that are happening in our chat, and I'd like to keep that going. Sarah and I are hoping this session would be not only us talking about some of our experiences, but also an information sharing session where we exchange ideas as a community. So I'd really like to know, what are you as faculty, as staff, as students, how are you interacting with Jay-Z in your classroom or in whichever environment you find yourself in as you interact with the Gen Z generation? Specifically in the classroom, what are you doing? What type of learning activities are you incorporating? What type of assessments are you using? If use a chat, please unmute and let's talk. I'd really like to know, what are you doing in your classroom, and let's share. I see Michelle says skill-based learning alone strikes me as, okay, that's it. Okay, that's a different one. All right.
that is an interesting point.
Yeah,
Which is why that whole idea of having that students wanting that liberal arts education in addition with the skills-based learning is kind of, yeah, maybe to combat that.
mhm. I see Jeremy says trying to increase flip the classroom and using peer instruction teaching techniques. Can you tell us more about that, Jeremy, if you don't mind? Can you unmute, please? And just tell us more if that's okay. And Felicia as well, she's saying we're doing lots of public speaking as part of my course and activities that get students interacting with each other.
Yes, they love interacting with each other.
Yeah.
In lots of different ways. At
Sorry,
least that's what I saw as a high school.
I was trying to eat my lunch. Sorry about that. I wasn't ready to speak.
I just caught you right at the right time.
Just briefly, I'm trying to do more opportunities where the students kind of guide some of the classroom activities, that they come prepared, and that they're able to do more and more peer instruction. I really found that a lot of my younger students are very responsive to that, rather than me just sit up in front of the room and talk at them.
Okay, thank you. I'm seeing more role-playing classroom activities, flipped classroom, peer learning, smaller to, wow, it's TikTok. I like that. Fruitlessly trying to be as or more entertaining and engaging. And that's what students like, really. And the think, pair, share. I feel like you all have you kind of know exactly what my next slide will be about, because that's exactly what I was going to talk about. Finding ways to diversify our teaching methods, trying to be as inclusive as possible, and incorporating a lot of teaching active learning, which is exactly what you're doing in your classroom. So it can be in mini lectures, having think, pair, share. I think someone mentioned that. Having funny videos, because a sense of humor does actually help to drive a message across. Having your students interact in peer interactions. I think some people have already mentioned that. I think with the pandemic, a lot of students felt isolated. And I noticed someone in the chat said something about the mental well-being. So having your students interact and having those group discussions really helps them to connect with each other. It's really a good strategy for teamwork. And again, it's just really to help students get away from being isolated.
So one thing I do want to point out is that a lot of our freshmen students, our first year university students this year, who are traditional first year students, most of them were probably in 8th grade when schools shut down, and then started 7th or 8th grade when school shut down, and then started high school depending on what area they lived in, maybe still having to be at home instead of being in a classroom with people. So you're going to see more and more of this as the younger ones who were in elementary school, middle school, when everything shut down, start becoming your college students. So.
Yeah, and before I proceed, I just saw as I'm trying to keep track in the chat section. Is it possible for some people to unmute and just share? I'm very interested in some of the comments. I find it very, very interesting. And I think a lot of folks would also benefit from that. Someone from the College of Hospitality, I think it was. I missed it now.
Yeah, I'm running back through the chat as well because this is being recorded and we definitely want people to, if they watch the recording, to also talk about, being able to hear your thoughts as well. But yeah, go ahead, Kat.
Hi. So my experience, I just started an online master's program through UT this spring, and not knocking anything, but I didn't receive any communication as far as you're a part of the college, here's how you connect with your colleagues and other students in the program. Really no direction or information at all, which was kind of crazy coming from undergraduate admissions. I know how much the school does to get incoming students involved and be a part of the community. So what I've done in the 2 classes that I'm in this semester, I've made group me's for the students in my class just to say, hey, we're all in this class and section, and even if we don't talk to each other, we're connected. And if, anyone has a question or anyone, as we progress and the projects get larger or the content becomes more difficult, we can all lean on each other because there's not a space to do that in the online community course setup outside of the guided discussion post spaces.
Yeah, I appreciate you sharing that, Kat. I think we need that. We really need to have a sense of community, ways of connecting with each other for sure.
Has anybody else
Um,
run into that issue with their online students about wanting more connection? I mean, it's not just Gen Z that wants this, according to researchers, it's a cross-generational human need, I think. So yeah, there's a lot of conversation in the chat. So
yeah.
yeah, I see that. I'm trying to follow all of it, but yeah.
It's really good. Okay, because of time, I'll move on to the next slide. So, I mean, AI, of course, everybody's talking AI and AI in education. And so there are different ways in which instructors are now incorporating AI in their classroom. The most common one now that I'm reading more and more about is when instructors suggest students critique a prompt, an AI response to their prompt. And that's one of the things that sometimes instructors are doing, and just to help students develop a sense of develop some critical thinking skills, because that's some of the thing that is one skill that is slowly going out of practice, in if I may use that word. A lot of students are not, especially this generation, it's hard for them to employ a lot of critical thinking. So one way in which AI is incorporated in the classroom is by having students critique responses to prompts. Of course, it's very important to discuss the ethical elements that are surrounding AI use, making sure, of course, that you, as an instructor, you highlight some of the social impacts. Doing so helps your students to relate any of the discussions in your classroom to life experiences. So pretty much taking conversations and applying what is learned in the classroom in their outside world. It's also important to place meaning and purpose at the center of your teaching. A lot of the Gen Z students, and I'm finding as a parent of 3 kids with who 2 of those are Gen Z, they really want to know why and what's in it for me. Why should I learn this? Why is it important? What do I gain from learning it? And how will I use it? I mean, going back to what Sarah was saying, they want to see the value. They want material that is relatable to their day-to-day practice. And so that is really something to keep in mind as you prepare and as you teach your students.
And I will say, when they were in high school, when I was in the high school setting, because I left the high school classroom in December of 2022, so not very long ago, my that group of students are now seniors in high school. But they would tell me, like, is this busy work? Why are we doing this? And I'm telling you, if you haven't seen that attitude, it's gonna be there. And even Gen Alpha, who Cozy has a Gen Alpha, older Gen Alpha, I have a young Gen Alpha. They question it too. Mine's 5, and she questions whether or not this is something she it's gonna help her. And so watch out. It's still gonna be there. So
Yeah. I see a lot of busy work. Yes, for sure. They just don't want busy work. So what does it mean then? How can we, so pretty much we suggest breaking your assignments into smaller steps, help your students maybe with the scaffolding, offer support so your students understand and they can acquire the necessary skills. One of the things that we mentioned about in our chat when Sarah started, someone pointed out to the short attention span that most students have. And so figuring out ways to cater to those students with short attention spans while at the same time making sure they are learning what they need to be learning. One of the other things is also offering low stakes assignments. You can use point solution, which is the clickers. And it just helps them, number one, to get a sense that they can always bounce back. I can fail forward if that's something that, something you want to show them or teach them rather, that it's okay to fail, but you're actually making progress because you're learning from what you're failing from. Also, it just helps to reduce anxiety and stress, which is a lot common nowadays. There's a lot of anxiety, a lot of stress going around because of everything else happening, as someone in the chat mentioned. And so have reflection journals, have discussion posts worth 5 to 10 points. Anything that is low stake, which is a low stake assignment, we definitely suggest incorporating into your classroom. And if you're using Canvas, you can use that space too to put all these assignments in. And also some learning technology tools, LTI tools, can be incorporated within the Canvas space to help your students participate in low-stake assignments. Are there any questions? I'm trying to keep track on the chat. Sharing documents amongst the group about everything that was discussed, like study notes. Yes, for sure. That's definitely a good one.
And please feel free to jump on the mic. I know that it's lunchtime, so I know some people are eating, but yeah, please do. We like to hear voices as well. So
Yes, of course. All right. Okay. So again, jumping back to the how to, again, using Canvas, because that's what we use most of the time. Sarah and I are living in Canvas on a daily basis. You can use some of the announcement spaces, within Canvas to communicate with your students, or pretty much finding a common space where you can streamline your communication. It really helps to eliminate confusion and misunderstanding. So it helps to also centralize your communication for your students, because they know exactly where to find day-to-day conversations. So, whatever it is that is going on in the classroom, having that one designated space makes a big difference. It's also important to develop online presence, and this is specifically for instructors who are teaching solely asynchronous classes. So having your students get a sense of, hey, I can connect with my instructor. I know who they are. I know exactly what they need, and how I know exactly what they expect from me. So making sure that you develop some relationships with your students is very important. There is what we call the Garrison Online Community of Inquiry. And they always talk about three types of presence. It's the cognitive presence, the social presence, and teaching presence. So those are the things that they talk about often. And so that's really something to keep in mind as you teach as you engage with your students, making sure that you give them that sense of connection, as I've written there in the slide. So someone mentioned TikToks. So incorporating videos is really important, utilizing humor in a form of, have your students create TikTok videos while we still have TikTok, by the way. You never know what will happen in the next few months, but have them create something humorous that allows them to engage with the material. For my dissertation, I interacted with one instructor who told me the students were asked to create a genome. I'm probably pronouncing it wrong. I'm not a biology major. But students went all out, they went all out creating a funny video based on what they were learning in class. So having them partake in an activity that allows them to apply what they're learning makes a difference. Yes, Kat, I see your hand raised.
I actually have a follow-up on this because I recently, in a discussion response, I think I referenced Abbott Elementary. If anybody watches it, absolutely hilarious. And they focus on sort of the disparities that their schools face in the public school system. And I referenced that, and I was told that that was not a professional insight or a professional resource. So I'm wondering how you would phrase quoting or using these type of videos or specific approaches as professional as they get incorporated into the coursework.
I know that for MLA, just because I used MLA as a when I was teaching my high school students, there are more and more pushes of how to cite these kind of sources because my students would use like podcasts. I taught literature, and we actually did a whole unit where we listened to, it was one of my students' favorite unit. And probably this is before COVID, right before COVID. So 2019, where we listened to the first season of the Serial podcast. And we treated it like a book, and boy, did they love that. And it was like, how do they cite stuff from that when we were doing academic? Yeah, as long as it's cited there, but MLA has formats. I see that S. Benjamin put in something of how to use digital media, podcasts, videos, television shows, that kind of thing in this. So there is more of APA good. I'm glad APA did it too. But there is more of a push of using this because of the conversations that are being had on shows like Abbott Elementary, or heck, I've seen people use The Good Place because it's philosophy all the way through. So yeah. Yes, high school students loved, my 10th graders loved the Serial podcast. They still message me on my old Instagram, teaching Instagram, about updates to that podcast. And it's been like 5, 6 years since they were in that class. So
Well, the other thing that we also use or suggest instructors use within Canvas is the analytics element, because it helps you to track students' performance. And in our case, we use Canvas. You can generate reports. You can know which students are at risk and how you can meet their needs. And so sometimes using data-driven insights, it helps you as the instructor create more interactive learning experiences. And so that is something we'd really suggest looking into if you have not used Canvas Analytics before. So what are some of the strategies that we suggest using? We have a cost map. And if you use a cost map, for someone who has not used it before, it helps you to align your course activities, your modules, and your assignments with your learning objectives. And it's a comprehensive planning tool that's used in design and the organization of the course. It helps in your scheduling of your lectures, your assignments, your exams, and any other activities that are critical and that help with the efficient running of your course. And if you want, you can also share your course map with your students. It helps to provide a visual representation of the course. The other one that we also suggest is incorporating backward course design. And it's the backward course design model is by Wiggins and McTeague. I know I'm butchering that, but it's a 2005. It's still very, very relevant, even in 2025, because when employed, it helps you to design or redesign any of your course. To identify your course goals, it encourages really intentional course design. So here's an example of a course map. Yeah, you can actually. So here's an example of a course map, and I'm looking at time. I apologize for sounding rushed. We do want to have enough time for questions and answers. So this is a course map template. It's from the QMR, qualitymatters.org. There's the link right there, but we can always share that. If you go to the next slide, please, Sarah, I think the QR code does also take you to a sample example. So if you scan the QR code, it takes you to the Quality Matters page. And if you scroll down, you select the handout on course mapping alignment. The next slide talks about ways in which the backward course design, it's just an example of how it works. And again, I apologize because of time, I will just rush through. So you really identify your course goals. So you ask yourself, how will my students be different after taking my class? How will I know they have changed? And what must students be able to think and do successfully to complete the assessment? So then you look at their learning outcomes. And last is, what do students need to complete? What do they need to complete in order to meet the learning outcomes? So that's something to really think about as you work on your course.
And if any of you are like me and have any background in K-12, you probably did this in your undergrad, right before finishing. So because I had to write a whole, maybe 3 units in my undergraduate or graduate education courses based just on this.
Right. But I also acknowledge that a lot of people who come into teaching at the university do not have any teaching experience. Some of the faculty members I've spoken with have just said, hey, the only experience I have with teaching is really being a GTA, or I've taught 1 or 2 classes, but I don't really have the foundation of how to teach a class or how to even design a course. So this is basically for someone who has never really used or doesn't have a good foundation. Maybe the word good is too strong, who doesn't have some foundation of how to design a course. So just to give you an idea.
Hold on, sorry, something happened. Let me fix this.
Okay.
Stop share.
Yeah, while Sarah is fixing that, are there any questions? I know the chat is buzzing. I appreciate you guys.
Okay. Sorry about that. I literally clicked on something to download that one of our people shared as an example, and all of a sudden everything went haywire. So I apologize. Let me fix this. Where'd it go? There it is. Okay. There we go. Sorry about that, y'all.
No problem. All right. So we're pretty much close to the end. Sarah has mentioned the strategies. I guess I'm just reiterating some of the strategies that you can use in your classroom. Micro-learning being one of them, simulations, gamifications. We have Kahoot, and you can always get a license as an instructor. We have credentials or digital badges, what was formerly known as badger, and that's something that you can also incorporate in your classroom. Yes, I see someone said menti.com is fun too. So there's so many different gamification apps that can be incorporated and used within your classroom. I know someone mentioned problem-based learning in the chat or something similar. So, finding ways to engage your students so they are not bored, as someone said in describing a Gen Z student, that they're bored. So finding ways to engage them while making sure that you are meeting your course goals, you're meeting your outcomes, and you're still helping them learn and succeed and have applicable, translatable skills that help them move on beyond graduation. And I'm looking at the time, we have 7 minutes. Sarah and I had a list of some resources you can scan and just browse through. See someone put in a worldsavvy.org.
There's also a
Yeah.
tiny URL link in case you're not able to scan any QR codes or anything like that. So, and we just checked it before this presentation and it still works. So,
So someone said virtually none of us is
oh
like you well
no,
trained in edgy and
absolutely not. When I will say this, when I entered the classroom in January of 2007, Facebook hadn't been open that long for people outside of the university setting because it was, remember, if you're old enough to remember, it was only for college students for a couple years. MySpace was starting to go on its way out. So yeah, I had to learn. I used to use Instagram in my classroom until our school district got rid of it, which made me sad. But there's always ways to find out. I've been seeing, what's interesting is I've been seeing more and more on TikTok, and this just might be my algorithm, but more and more on TikTok and on Instagram that of university instructors getting doing things with including I've seen they probably post a lot of this off of university property because of rules and stuff. But it's interesting to see this how they're interacting now with their students and using these different methods, and it's sparking a larger conversation outside of their classroom community, which is really cool. I don't know if anybody is on TikTok, but if you've seen Hillman Talk, which is different professors and experts, but professors from historically Black colleges and universities, so HBCUs, who have started outside classes, free teaching things with reading lists for non-university students. It's amazing to see this, and just people follow that. So yeah, there is this movement of seeing how education can grow. Maybe I don't know, edX is a great example too of how education can show up for people in different ways. So, um, yes, humanizing. So, wonder if you could all address how this might intersect with John, anxious generation. Oh, so anxious generation, that is on my reading list. But it is something that I think I see as a parent, and probably Cozy sees as a parent as well. Um, and I was seeing as a teacher before I left the classroom. Um, there was that worry of, and I kind of know a little bit about it, but there was that worry of social media and digital media causing more anxiety and more worry and more mental health issues. And I think that's something that's going to be addressed for a very long time. And I think we do see this. I think we will see this in higher education more and more as these younger people who are still in high school and, all the way down to elementary school, as you start getting Gen Alpha, especially into who are, your middle schoolers, mostly middle schoolers and elementary schoolers right now, get into, yeah, get into high school and then get into college and how that works. So yeah. Oh, thank you guys for attending. I know some people are hopping out. I'm giggling at the discussion of the game Oregon Trail right now in the comments. The updated version is amazing. I love it. As an Oregon Trail player, and yes, I always died of dysentery or a broken leg on that game. Um, yes.
Just come.
So does anybody have any questions or comments? I really appreciate, we really do appreciate all of you coming to this. Um, so yeah, thank you
Yeah.
so much.
Oh, thank you all.
Yeah, and if you need any help, let us know. Some of y'all might see us on your Canvas specific tickets.
Yeah. Right.